Well, hello comrades and welcome back to the Ushanka Show. As I promised, today we're going to talk more about Soviet cars and did you hear that? That sounds like maybe my neighbor got a new chainsaw. Well, actually this is the sound of Invalidka car, the car that we're going to talk about today. It's a very unusual car, it's very special, and I would say it's probably even more special than the coolest car in the world, Bugatti Veyron, which will cost you arm and a leg, right? Well, not exactly true, because you can buy Bugatti Veyron for $1 million. You could not buy Invalidka car. That car will cost you arm and a leg, arm or a leg, literally. What I mean, that car was designed specifically and distributed for handicapped people, mostly for veterans who lost their limbs in World War II. Soviet government after World War II saw a big need to provide some kind of transportation for people with disabilities. So they tasked the motorcycle factory to create a car for handicapped people. So of course, if the motorcycle people trying to design a car, it's probably gonna look like a motorcycle. So the small motorcycle factory, the Serpukov Motorcycle Zavod, was designing and making motorcycles since like 1939. And they came up with this interesting looking a car for handicapped people, and in order to make it cheap, because government wasn't selling this car, it wasn't for sale, the only way you could get it is through special services which help handicapped people. It had 3 wheels. You could tell the people who designed it were in motorcycles. It's a rear-wheel drive. The nice thing about this car, which actually wasn't technically a car, I would say it was street legal 3-wheeler, is that all the controls were on the steering wheel, so if the person was handicapped and missing legs, they could still drive it. This car was really light, about 600 pounds, had a tiny 1-cylinder 2-stroke engine with about 8 horsepower, which was taken from the motorcycle, and had a single big headlight, which you could see at this picture. And because of that look, the car got its nickname, the Cyclop, the person with one eye. They produced this car for about 5 years, made about 20,000 of them. This design wasn't exactly a good design. A car was really slow, really noisy, had 0 off-road capabilities, and in Soviet Union there weren't a lot of blacktop roads, so they had problems with that. And later they tried to put a little bit more powerful engine in this car, and it started having issues, started tipping. So that's the first car for handicapped people, the Cyclop, which was produced from 1952 till 1957. So the next car that was designed at the motorcycle factory called C3 Alpha, and it has a big improvement over the Cyclop. They had additional wheel. So now we have a 4-wheeler. We have a street legal 4-wheeler, looks like a car. We don't have any more the tipping issues, so it's a little bit more comfortable. Also, they used advanced suspension system, which was copied from German Volkswagen Bug, designed by Ferdinand Porsche. So it's actually a pretty cool system. Car ran on an oil gas mix, just like your chainsaw. And interestingly, on Soviet gas stations, they had, besides regular gas and maybe premium gas, you could buy pre-mixed oil gas mixture for cars like that, because they produced around 200,000 of these cars in 12 years, since from 1958 till 1970. Still, it was a really cheap, really like crude made car. It had no heater. Think about it. Russia, cold winters, Russian bears, and the car which had no heater whatsoever. We have a really popular Soviet comedy, which you could see right here, and you could see how easy it was to move this car because the weight was only about 900 pounds.
Где этот чертов инвалид?
Не шуми, я инвалид.
And now we're gonna talk about Invalidka car, or as the people were calling it, Żabka, or the little toad, because a lot of them were made in this dark green color. As you can see, the motorcycle factory didn't have a lot of car designers, so this car is basically like really basic straight lines, nothing fancy. Has a 14 horsepower motorcycle engine, of course, 4 wheels. All the controls on the car were at the steering wheel, so a handicapped person can easily operate that thing. Window had a really basic design, just a slider type window. Also, interesting detail about this car is that it had 4 gears forward, and switching it you get in the same 4 gears going backwards. So this car could actually go as fast backwards, about 30-40 miles an hour, and forward with exactly the same speed. As you know already, this car was extremely loud. You could hear from far away. So it was really noisy inside, and also quite often people were complaining that its exhaust was getting inside of the car. This car had a giant improvement. It had a heater. So now you could use this car in the winter. It was, for the size of the car, you could tell it pretty much a Soviet smart car, right? It's really small, really easy to park, although in Soviet Union, as we talked already earlier, we didn't have a lot of issues finding a parking spot, because when there's not many cars, there's a lot of empty parking spots. So this car was produced for over 25 years, 27 years to be exact, from 1970 till 1997, and they manufactured about 223,000 these cars. So they were making roughly around from 10,000 to 15,000 cars per year. And as I said before, it literally will cost you arm or a leg to get this car. There was no cars for sale, and the people who would get the car, they could have it only for 5 years. Then the government takes the car back and pretty much scrap it and give you another car. So these cars are now quite rare because most of them were scrapped. It was designed cheap and was designed to last around 5 years, so they all were destroyed after that term. I remember in Kiev, these cars were everywhere, and you could hear from far away the slow car which was making this horrible loud noise. Because the car was pretty light, around 1,000 pounds, one of the pranks that people like to do to the owners, if they don't like them, they could just pick it up. Young guys can pick up that car, and they will put it, like for example, on the picnic table, or carry the car around the building and repark it somewhere else where it's hard to find. Also, some of my viewers told me a story that he saw how 11 people managed to fit inside of that car. So that's pretty impressive, looking at the size of this vehicle. And so that's the most famous thing that people would mess around this car, is that they could pick it up and set it up somewhere in a funny spot. It has pretty decent gas mileage. You still had to use oil gas mix on it. And unfortunately now, well, fortunately or unfortunately, these cars are not on the streets anymore, and in fact the motorcycle factory, Serpukhov motorcycle factory, is bankrupt and they don't make cars since 2008. So this is the story about the famous Invalidka, or the Toad car, that always brings some memories from my Soviet childhood, and now it's a hot collector's items. People do a lot of customizing for those cars they can find, and you could see a couple pictures right here what people can do with those cars. I hope you enjoy the show, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, до свидания, goodbye.